Hi everyone, Amy here. Just checking in for our midweek updates on week 6, particularly regarding your campaign analysis blog rough draft discussion that's going on this week. I have been posting a lot of different updates this week and last week and throughout the unit in general in my news feed, in my comments on the discussions we've been having. So make sure that you go back if you've missed any of my videos, any of my news feed posts, any of my discussion posts. I've got a lot of little detailed information in all these different places and not necessarily a complete synthesis of it anywhere except looking at the assignment sheet or just the D2L shell in general. So make sure that you are interacting with all of the content throughout this unit to get some of your different questions and concerns clarified as we wrap things up at the end of next week. Okay, so this week most of you did get your rough drafts posted on time, which is good. So make sure that you follow through and also complete the feedback portion of the assignment so that you don't lose 10% and that you get full credit for this week's discussion as well as your essay in general. But let me just jump into the discussion here where I can give you some feedback on your rough drafts overall. I kind of struggled with how I wanted to provide feedback in this week's video, particularly because I do want to provide some constructive suggestions for how you can improve things, but I also don't want anyone to feel like they're being picked on or like I'm trying to single anyone out in a negative way. So what I'm going to do here, instead of doing my regular 5 minutes of fame, I'm just going to pull up some of the drafts that I want to highlight a few things in. And I've also chosen to focus on drafts that I think are doing particularly well. So if you do get some feedback here in my video, please don't feel picked on and rest assured that I chose you because you are actually someone who's on the right track. So I'll start out with a few just kind of technical things, suggestions for how you can execute some of those blogging conventions in the rubric that we've been talking about kind of throughout the unit. Don't forget that you do need to embed your links for proper documentation in the blogging genre. I want to see a works cited in the Word document that you uploaded, but on your actual blog, all of your links should be embedded. And what that means is that you should also not see any of the URL script like http:// blah 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 blah. That should all be hidden, and that's what we mean by embedded within the actual text of your blog. So make sure you're using that link feature when you're creating your post, and I'll try to highlight some of that in more detail as I look into some of the examples I'm going to pull up in just a second. And then the other thing I want to point out that many of you did do effectively with this week's discussion already is that when you upload your actual Word document version of the blog, you should actually include it in MLA format. So that will just make it easier for me to find all the information I need to find, and you're going to have a works cited at the end anyway, so it makes sense to just go ahead and do MLA for that Word document and pretty much any Word document you would do for this class overall. Okay, so I'll go ahead and jump into some of the drafts that I wanted to pull out to kind of highlight what I think are some of the bigger revision suggestions that I think need to be emphasized based on what I saw in all of your rough drafts in general. So I did read everyone's rough draft, and I've kind of synthesized what I think are the biggest, most important things that you guys need to work on here. And I'll try to also go chronologically through the essay, although that's not necessarily how I think you should write the essay. Of course, I think chronological writing can be very difficult. It's better to just start with your main idea, do an outline, flesh out your topic sentences, and then go back and fill in the paragraphs. But I'll try to go through the essay like from start to finish just to emphasize what I think you guys could work on the most at each point. So when you jump into your essay, you do want to limit your summary at the beginning to just a very brief introduction in the first paragraph. And so the first person that I'm going to pull out to emphasize how this could be done maybe a little more effectively is Jason. So again, I'm not picking on you, Jason, because I think you have not done anything right here or anything at all. By that means, actually, I think your essay is in pretty good shape, but this is one thing that I think you could work on. So, really you're going to link to the ad, so you don't need to provide such an in-depth summary like you did, for example, in your last essay, which was a summary in and of itself, where the summary was the whole thing. Since you're linking to the ad, your reader can just click on the link, go watch the ad video themselves, and they'll see everything. So it doesn't really matter if you can spit it out back to them in your own words, because they're going to see it for themselves very quickly and easily. So I did notice that several of you, not Jason, but several of you did have summaries that went on for extensive portions of your essay, or even the majority of your essay. So watch out for that. This is not a summary essay. And if you found it to be very difficult to write the essay, it may be because you're trying to summarize too much, because I would never ask you to write a 3-page summary of a 5-minute ad or less. That would be extremely difficult. So if you struggled, it may be because you're just trying to come up with things to say in a summary when that's really not what you're supposed to be writing about. So go back and look. You really just want a few kind of introductory context clue sentences in the very first paragraph of your essay. Jason, on the other hand, kind of goes into a lot more depth. He has not only one but multiple paragraphs just introducing and summarizing the essay. I would say that all of this needs to be condensed. All of this needs to be condensed and then kind of shrunk into one single introductory paragraph. And then it kind of continues to go on. And then finally, not until page 3 does Jason start to talk about the rhetorical points that should actually be the primary focus of the overall essay. So actually, Jason, I think you could kind of work backwards through your essay and have your conclusion here, although you do need to have a little bit more of a direct evaluation in that paragraph. You could then talk about, each of the rhetorical points that you have here, and it would be great. But for the first couple of pages, most of that needs to be condensed into just a very brief introduction of the essay, and then you can go into talking about those rhetorical points. Okay, so then after you summarize the essay and kind of introduce it in your introductory paragraph, you're going to go into talking about each of those rhetorical appeals that you want to highlight. Now, according to the assignment sheet, you do not actually have to have a thesis at the beginning of your essay, although some of you did include one. You only need to have a thesis at the end of your essay. That's called a delayed thesis strategy. It's very common in open form prose, which you probably read about in your readings for this unit. And it's something that kind of, I think, is a good transition from the summary essay to the argument that we'll do at the end of the semester. So, I'm not going to be upset or punish you if you do have a thesis at the beginning, but if you do, it needs to be one that you're actually going to follow along with throughout the essay, and it needs to be one that matches the overall delayed thesis that you do ultimately arrive at the end of your essay as well. And so, Emily, I wanted to pull yours out. I think your essay is in really good shape overall, but you offer a thesis at the beginning and then don't exactly follow along with it, and then kind of a different thesis at the end. So I wanted to kind of provide that as a suggestion here. So at the end of your introduction, which I would say is a strong introduction, you say the ad uses powerful images, simple logic, and a strategic ethical appeal to evoke emotion and persuade the audience. This could be a very near perfect thesis. However, you would need to follow along with it in terms of your next paragraph talking about powerful images, the subsequent paragraph talking about simple logic, and then the further subsequent paragraph talking about strategic ethical appeals, if you were to successfully kind of fulfill the promise that's being made by the thesis as it stands here. But that's not what you do. So first of all, you go directly into talking about emotional appeals with the paragraph right after your introduction. So that kind of flips this thesis backwards, which can be very confusing for a reader. If a reader sees things in a particular order in a thesis statement, then they're going to expect to see those things talked about in that same order in the body of the essay. And that's kind of a lesson that will be very important as we get into the argument in the next unit as well. So that kind of continues through as you continue to talk about emotion. But the other thing I want to highlight about Emily's essay here, everyone, is that she actually does a really good job with what is probably the hardest thing to achieve in this assignment, which is to execute effective topic sentences that bring rhetorical appeals to the forefront of your discussion. So really what you need to be doing is exactly what Emily's doing here, which is stating the rhetorical effect in the topic sentence and then filling up your paragraphs with examples of that rhetorical effect, and then stating the next rhetorical effect, and then filling up the paragraph with examples. So I do think that Emily did a really good job with this, and then using that to all kind of culminate on your evaluation of the ad at the end of the essay. So for Emily, I would just say make sure that those body paragraphs follow along in the same order as the thesis that you offer at the beginning if you are going to do so. And then at the end, you also need to make sure you're recapping correctly here, because these are the order that the paragraphs in the body of the essay, but this isn't what you said at the beginning. So make sure that it all kind of matches up. Okay, just a couple of other suggestions that I wanted to point out. That point I just made about focusing on appeals, that was something else that I noted also when I was reading Kendall's essay. So Kendall's in pretty good shape in terms of the depth of thinking that's going on and just kind of the examples that are being pulled out, but the rhetorical effects need to come to the forefront much more strongly in terms of topic sentences. So sometimes when you fail to include the rhetorical effect at the beginning of the paragraph, it can almost seem like the paragraph is more like summary. And the other thing I would say about Kendall's paragraphs is that he's putting all the rhetorical appeals into one paragraph here, where they each need to be teased out for a full discussion of each one. So instead of starting the paragraph with summary, move the rhetorical effect to the beginning in a topic sentence, and then provide the examples in the body of the paragraph. You also might have noticed several of these are separating their discussion of the supplementary source to a different paragraph at the end. That was one thing that I noticed Kara was doing, even though Kara's essay is very near complete and in really good shape. The paragraphs kind of circle from pathos to logic, logos, to ethos and credibility, back to pathos, and into that supplementary source. So I would make sure that the supplementary source is definitely connected to one of the rhetorical appeals, but that it weaves in with your overall discussion of that particular rhetorical appeal. So if you're going to talk about pathos up here, talk about pathos all at once and bring in this supplementary source right then when you're talking about the pathological effects of the ad, where it will seem much more relevant. And then you can talk about logic, then you can talk about credibility and that sort of thing. And then I do want to also emphasize that everyone does need to actually make an evaluation of the ad at the end. Matthew's essay was in really good shape as well, but that was one thing, Matthew, that I really wanted you to come right out and say. Did you think it was persuasive or not? That needs to be part of that delayed thesis that you offer in the conclusion at the end of your essay. So you say, whether or not the Gulf is in critical condition isn't nearly as obvious as BP's campaign seemed to suggest. The only truth is that scientists can't conclude, we are unaware of the consequences, and that sort of thing, but you never really say definitively if you think the ad was persuasive. So when I say evaluate, I say directly evaluate its success in achieving its persuasive goals. And then you can connect that to a recap of the rhetorical points you've made throughout the essay. So, because of its appeals to logos, pathos, and ethos, the ad is overall persuasive or overall not persuasive. And then just a couple other quick things. You definitely need to focus on just one ad. Don't try to evaluate the campaign as a whole. And then also don't let your discussion become overrun by your supplementary source. That was something I kind of feared here in Phoebe's essay. Phoebe, you did a really good job, but a lot of the beginning of your essay talks about the supplementary source, and you kind of alluded to some things about the overall campaign. So you should really just jump into your discussion of those rhetorical effects right at the beginning and make that the focus of your overall discussion. And then finally, I'll just wrap up by saying that so far the comments have been excellent. Everyone's done both their in-text and answered all the questions in their feedback to one another. So you've all gotten full credit for that. Great work. Just keep that up over the weekend and enjoy the 4th of July and be safe, everyone. Thank you.